Welcome back to the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. I have Brad Brooks on here, is the owner of Argali, maker of excellent belts, too. Thanks for being back on here.
Well, thank you. Never been introduced that way, Jeff.
Well, I wanted to make a point of the belt because I'm not one to I don't really trust reviews because it seems like half the reviews that people do for products are like, hey, just got it out of the box and it looks awesome, 5 stars. Like, well, does it work? So the first test was at school and it performed well, keeping just, it was fine. And then I thought the biggest test was going to be when I go out rut hunting and it's so wet up here, which you would not know about because it never rains when you're in Kodiak. But I have these old Cabela's pants that are thicker and they get wet, and so they get pretty heavy. And so I thought if there was going to be a test for the belt, it would be that. But man, that thing is so light, but just cinches down, and it just does not give up. It's pretty sweet. Well,
thank you. Yeah, certainly was the idea when we designed it. So, yeah. You're talking about our people that don't know our Kodiak belt, which is aptly named because Kodiak was the first place where I felt like we really kind of put it through the paces. But yeah, it's a field belt, knife sharpener in one. And I think, if I were not the designer and maker of it and I were the consumer, I would be pretty skeptical of a product like that because it just kind of, if I'm being honest, it sounds like it could be a little gimmicky. It's like, okay, knife sharpening belt buckle, like what else, it just sounds too good to be true or too gimmicky. When you hear it, but it actually works for both applications very well. And I think once you use it, you're like, it does work.
Yeah.
But when you hear about it, it's just like, I think there's good reason in our modern day era to kind of be skeptical of things that sound too good to be true. And for this one, I mean, there's just nothing else like it, right? There is no field belt knife sharpener out there. So yeah. I've noticed that just with having to do a little bit of education with people on trying it out. And that's why we also offer such a fairly generous return policy. It's full, you can use it, abuse it, whatever, for a full 90 days. You don't like it, full money back, guarantee type deal. And I do that because it's just there's just no other way, I think, for people that might be a little hesitant to try it out. And I believe in the product and know it's a good product, so it's not a big deal for us to do that. So
yeah, when I got out of the box and I put the belt together without having it on, and I thought there's no way this is going to work because there was no tension. And so it just pulled through every time, and I thought, Brad, you're a nice guy, but man, I don't know about this belt. But yeah, you need that tension in order to keep it tight, and it's crazy. But yeah. So anyway, you can go to Argali, ArgaliOutdoors.com to order them?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to have you on here was to recap the episode that we previewed, which is episode 221. You were coming up to Alaska, and you wanted to get blacktail deer, and then caribou, and then moose. It was over a 6-week period. Is that?
That's right.
Is that right? Yeah. So because you were going to be on today, my wife was asking who you are, and I said, it's Brad from Argali. Yeah. And so we said, let's watch one of the films. And so we were watching Ridgelines, which was from 3, 4, 5 years ago.
That was actually our first film we ever did. That was the beginning of Argali. Yeah. Before there was anything. I mean, anyway, I can go on about that, but keep going. Sorry.
So in that you go and you scout some territory in June before the season, and you scout up some nice bucks, and you get an eyes on the terrain. But that's not possible if you're coming up to Alaska. So does it feel like everything is kind of rushed because you don't have the benefit of getting boots on the ground early?
Yeah, it's like speed dating for hunting. It's probably the way I describe it, where you don't really have a lot of time. I'm a person who generally, I've hunted a lot of places, what I would consider kind of blind. We're going into it. You've never touched the ground before. And so I'm not unaccustomed to that, and you end up. My mentality going into that is you're going to burn some time, spend some time just trying to figure out the animals in that place and kind of where they like to be, how they like to move. And especially because I was just hunting with my bow and I didn't have a lot of time in a couple of these places. That was a concern a little bit going into it, especially on Kodiak. Although I hunted a spot on Kodiak that was like semi-familiar because we hunted kind of close to where I was at last year. So I didn't feel like I was going into that one blind. But for sure, like caribou and moose hunting, like not only I've never hunted moose before, but for caribou, it was definitely a challenge, in part because I was joining somebody else's moose hunt. It wasn't a caribou hunt. It was like a moose hunt where there might be caribou. And I mean, I can go into it in more detail, but like, and that's exactly what happened. Like, in terms of just like, it wasn't like there were caribou everywhere every day of the hunt. And it was a difficult hunt, probably, one of the more difficult hunts I've had in Alaska, just in terms of, the way it went. But, so yeah, I would much prefer like being able to go into a place, at least getting to know the lay of the land a little bit, understanding the way the topography unfolds. Like it's a huge advantage when you know a place, even if you don't like know the way the animals are going to be moving. To me, it's just a huge advantage if you just understand the topography of a place and how to move around it. And I didn't have any of that kind of going into this hunt.
Yeah, I noticed that by hunting with my wife down in Wyoming. We scouted, and then everything totally changed when the season opened in October. So the nice bucks that we saw in these little areas in June and July and got some great pictures on the game cameras, they just were not around in October. And so everything changes. You know, like in July, it was looking underneath these rocks in the shade, and like you just poke them out. It's like, that's where you look. Boom, look, there is one. Glass up a little bit right there in the shade, out of the hot. Boom, there it is. But October, totally different. So it's nice to have a plan, but just being prepared to have it totally blown up. How close was the plan that you made on like where to hunt, what to look for? Did you make a specific plan? Was it kind of general? And then how did that blacktail hunt unfold?
Yeah, great question. So I always have a plan. I've never just like, maybe it's my personality, Jeff, but I can't fathom not having a plan going into a place. It's really hard. The caribou hunt, I think, might be the exception in some ways to that. And when I say I have a plan, like I don't have a plan of like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to hunt this basin, and then I'm going to shoot it here. Like, not like that, but I have a plan in terms of like, here's how I'm going to approach this hunt. Here's what I'm going to try. Here's how I'm going to try and hunt caribou, blacktail, and moose, and my strategy for doing it. So on the Kodiak, on the blacktail hunt, you know, my strategy was hunting them exactly like I'd hunt mule deer in the early season. You know, and that could be basically the way I hunt mule deer in the lower 48 is not an uncommon strategy. Early season, it's usually like spot them, put them to bed, try and sneak in on them in their bed. Like that's usually like the ideal scenario. It does not work out like that all the time. Sometimes you're ambush hunting them, but if I had my ideal scenario, like that's the way it goes down. And same thing with blacktail, like at least that was my strategy, is like spot them, put them to bed, try and figure out how to get in on them. I was assuming that they would sort of be doing things that mule deer, similar to what mule deer do in the early season, which is they're not interested in does. They don't really have anywhere in particular they want to be. They're going to eat and get water and sleep. And during the day, they're mostly going to be sleeping. That is almost exactly what the blacktail were doing where I was at. You know, you'd see them get up during the middle of the day, which is not, again, uncommon for mule deer. But that's basically what happened. The first buck I shot was a little interesting because we couldn't get out of Kodiak Township for a while that day just because of weather. Finally got out of town, set up camp, and it was late in the afternoon. Like I want to say like 4 o'clock by the time we actually got to hunting. So we went on this knob above camp, saw a couple does, didn't see any deer. And then I had my friend and photographer, Brandon Kumler, shout out to BK, great dude, who's not a hunter at all, but I was about ready to leave this glass and knob, and I was like, well, there's nothing here, BK, might as well move on. And he doesn't have any binoculars or anything, and he just goes, isn't that a deer over there? And like off in the distance, he just saw this red dot in a sea of green. And I was like, yep, that is a deer, BK. And looked at it, and I'm like, holy hell, that's a nice buck, man. And, that late in the day, it's tough to figure out how you're going to sneak in on a deer that's kind of moving and feeding. My strategy in that situation is like ambush style hunting, like sneak in, try and put yourself in his path and figure it out when you get close. He happened to bed down, and we couldn't see where he bedded down. He went out of sight. We relocated, and for some reason he stood up across this canyon at about 5:30, and I don't know why he stood up, but that was what made him that was the end of him when that happened, because that gave me insight to where he was. And I knew I didn't have much time before like the evening feed was going to happen. And so I had to run across the other side of this big drainage and get in position. And I could not for the life of me see him. I was 24 yards from him at one point, standing there. And I was just like, well, I think he's there, but I should be able to see him, but I cannot. And I just waited, and he eventually stood up. And that was that.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plans shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
But anyway, so it was just kind of one of those deals where it's like I wasn't expecting to bed and sneak in on a deer in the evening, but that's the way it worked out. And that's one of the few times in my life where I was like, the first stalk of a trip, you're like, this is exactly what I'm going to do, and it's going to work out exactly as I planned. And it did. It never goes to plan, right?
Yeah.
There's always some nuance you have to like ad lib, like when you're sneaking down in on an animal. But that one worked out really well, and I was able to put an arrow in him right away. And then, the next day, I really wanted to shoot nice bucks. I didn't want to shoot smaller bucks just because I guess I did that year before. I passed on a couple smaller bucks that was within bow range on. And we had been hunting kind of all day and seen some nice bucks, but nothing crazy big. And then I finally saw like a nice buck in the early afternoon, and was able to just like to make a long story short. I was self-filming half the time on this trip, and if you've ever self-filmed an archery hunt, it is like kind of a next level in difficulty. It's hard enough to kill someone with a bow. carrying cameras around, 1 or 2 cameras or more, is in trying to like actually like film, is just challenging, man. I don't know how to describe it unless you've tried it. I had a main camera. I got to 60 yards on this buck who was bedded on top of this cliff, and I set up my main camera on a tripod, and I just hit record, and I was gonna sneak in and get me at about 35 yards shooting this buck the way the topography laid out. And for whatever reason, again, that buck, I set up that camera and I started sneaking, and I kind of peeked up, so I was crawling on my belly. And that buck was just staring straight at my camera, which probably looked like a giant black eyeball. And he did not like it. And he stood up, and I was like, damn it. Like, this is a perfect scenario for stalking and shooting a buck. And I just blew it. The camera just blew it. And he kind of like walked off. He nervously walked off the cliff, and I ran down, and he just happened to be standing down there with a doe. At like, I want to say like 35 yards or something like that. And I was able to shoot him. So anyways, worked out pretty well. I didn't think I'd shoot 2 bucks in 2 days in Kodiak. But it worked out that way. So Perfect. It was a good start to the trip. Yeah. And then I had one more tag, and I got greedy one time on a buck, and then I was just picky. I just wanted something big, and I didn't see anything that was kind of what I was looking for. So,
what have you noticed as far as, because you've done this a couple times now, the difference between stalking a blacktail and stalking a mule deer? I have limited experience down there in Wyoming, and we were doing some rifle stuff, but my wife had elk tag, and so we did some archery elk. But it seems like it's just so stinking loud down there and exposed, because everything is dry and everything is super loud. The rocks are super loud. But then Kodiak, I haven't hunted there, but you know of it, and Southeast Alaska is similar in that you have so much vegetation, and that stuff is so loud, but in a different way. Do you find that it's easier to stalk an animal in down there for mule deer or up here for blacktail?
No, I don't think one's easier than the other. I just think they're different, and it really depends. It varies. Like, there are some places where stalking mule deer where it's really dry. Like, there's some places in Nevada where it's like, God, it feels very difficult to sneak in on a mule deer because you don't have a lot of vegetation topography. And there are some places, I guess, on Kodiak where it feels like the winds are just vicious and make it difficult to sneak in. And I don't know. No, I think it's just different, man, to be honest with you. I'd say the one thing about blacktail that can make them easier, and I think this is something I was, like, strategy-wise I was paying attention to, is that if you really kind of wait for those deer to bed, there's a lot of like tall vegetation relative to the body size of a Sitka blacktail, and they can bed down in some vegetation that makes it very difficult for them to see what's coming. Even if they looked your direction, they wouldn't see you. And so if you are patient in that regard, like, you can have some, Sitka blacktails will put themselves in some very vulnerable positions, whereas big mule deer, I don't think they really ever put themselves in vulnerable positions. I mean, very rarely outside of the rut. They do, but you have to be a lot more patient. And typically they're bedding down in hard landscapes, so like dirt, rock. And they might bed at the base of a cliff. They might bed on the top of a cliff or underneath a tree. Places where they typically have a visual advantage and so they rarely will put themselves in a position where they can't see, they don't feel secure.
Yeah.
Whereas it doesn't seem like Sitka blacktails really think about that or really as much.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is the pressure thing too, and it doesn't seem like mule deer they never get nervous. It's either we're all good or we're all bad. When we were like, even some of the smaller ones, like we kind of came up on a bedded one that was in a really bad spot, but it was a small one, but it went from bedded to running without standing. There was no sort of stand up, oh, what's going on over there? I'm curious. And you'll get that with blacktail, where they'll kind of stand up, get nervous, not like it, maybe walk off, maybe trot off. And sometimes if they kind of go around a corner, like, you can then catch up to them. and it's not over. And that staying with it is such a huge thing. There are a couple of times, even in rut, when you kind of spook something a little bit. They're just not really sure what's going on. But you can, let them kind of go a little bit, gentle call, and then you can kind of freeze them a little bit. This last weekend when Abby called in a deer, like it saw us, and we were kind of talking and trying to get a range, and we were trying to get a shot. It was a pretty small forky, but Abby wanted to get it with the camera, and so it definitely saw that we weren't what the noise was that was calling it in, but still just curious. And that was a rut thing. But even in the alpine, you can see that happen sometimes where they're just like, oh, so what is that over there? I want to find out what it is rather than I'm out of here, because that could be danger.
Yep. I don't know, man. Especially when you get into the more mature age class of mule deer, I just haven't found a more cagey animal than outside of the rut. Like, they're just cagey and cautious. And even during the rut, some of those big bucks, man. I just got out of a rut hunt and saw a handful of very large mule deer bucks. And it's just incredible how secluded they can be, even in at their most vulnerable. You're like, man, that is as exposed as you will ever see that buck throughout the year, and he's in a tiny opening surrounded by brush and timber, and they're just not easy to hunt.
Yeah, it's funny too about the blacktails. The antlers will stand out so much in contrast against the green, and if they're not bedded down in brush or in the vegetation, you see the whites of their body or the side of their body. It's just a beacon of orange.
Yeah,
it's such the contrast. It's awesome.
Yeah, that is one thing that maybe makes Kodiak slightly, for glassing deer, it's really makes it slightly easier, is like, especially in August, everything is bright green. It's not like you get a little bit of green against the red of the deer. It's like the entire island is bright green. So you get this real contrast in the animals that makes them easier, I think, to spot than mule deer. And yeah, you're right. So one other thing I'd say is like blacktails, well, they will bed down in tall grass and make themselves what I would consider to be vulnerable. In some ways, it also makes them harder, safer. They must feel safe in that tall vegetation, because, that first buck I shot, like, I was 24 yards away from him and above him, and I couldn't see, with my binoculars, I couldn't see a hint of red in his antlers because the grass was so tall. I should have been able to see just a piece of him, right? And I was staring directly at where he was at, and I could not see anything. So had I been a predator, I would not, and the wind was right, I would not have, seen him either. So I suppose it's a double-edged sword for him.
Yeah. I did that in southeast down here. Saw a nice buck, made a move on it, got all the way down this chute and was about 20 yards, and there was just a doe. And I thought, gosh dang it, all this work, a couple hours, hour and a half, just getting down, being as quiet as possible, staying out of sight. And then all of a sudden, antlers just rise from, we don't have as tall of vegetation as down there, that alpine grass. Mars is a lot more of a lower thing, but it's funny, they can just find that spot, and he just stood up from it, and then, easy shot. I thought, dude, that was crazy. I was about ready to get frustrated and just leave, because I thought it was just a doe, but the doe was just standing there, didn't care at all. And then the buck just finally stood up. But So moving on to caribou, what was the biggest, I guess, change in tactic, plan, or whatever? You have successful Kodiak hunt under your belt. Were you confident? How long does it take you to refocus? What do you got on the transition there?
Yeah, I don't, let's see here. So I don't feel like I've ever gone into a hunt feeling like I wasn't going to get an opportunity. I don't know, man. I just feel like, and I don't mean that to sound like arrogant. It's just like, especially with a caribou hunt, it's like, if you've hunted enough, and I feel like if you believe in yourself and your abilities enough, you're like, okay, like, I'm probably going to get an opportunity, at least one opportunity on any given hunt, if I really like try hard. And I felt that way going into the caribou hunt. I think the thing that I didn't know going into that hunt was just like whether or not I was going to see caribou. I had no idea. It was like, they could be there, but they might not be. Who knows? So, and we were flying in to our camp. I saw a handful, but not a lot of caribou. And I mean a handful. And so I was like, well, this will be interesting. And, we landed and went up above our camp that night to glass. And we ended up seeing a lot of caribou around camp that first day, like off in the distance. And I was like, okay, good sign. A lot of caribou around. And so the first day I was like, okay, well, these caribou are literally moving through where we're at in mostly one direction. So it was very clear from watching that one night that we were just like, strategy for me was going to be ambush, like let them kind of walk, like try and head them off and then sneak in close as they're walking. Because if anybody's ever hunted caribou could probably relate to the fact that you're not going to catch up to them if they're walking, if they're on the move. They're just like, it's just hard to describe how fast they walk. Sometimes it's like, it doesn't look like they're walking fast, but they cover ground so incredibly fast when they want to move that there's just no way I could catch up to them. Mm-hmm. So I found this one ridge that there were these ridges. Imagine these ridges going behind our camp, going up towards a big mountain. The caribou were crossing this river below us, and then they were coming up the ridges kind of that I was on, and a few other ridges. And we just kind of camped out. We hiked up early, camped out on this ridge first day, and I thought, well, hopefully a caribou will come up here. This ridge the day before, had been covered in caribou. The day we got up there, there was nothing. And there wasn't a single caribou until 11 o'clock. 2 bulls came on the ridge, like just as I had hoped. And I was like, well, this is working out very well. And those bulls were coming like directly at us, and we were just kind of like, trying to shadow them, like trying to guess where they're going to come out and find a good spot to hide. And that particular stalk didn't work out. Like they came close, bedded down. I got to like 60 yards and somehow made a stalk in, and then I just got cocky, man. I thought I could get closer. And eventually the caribou saw me and ran off. Next day, tried the same strategy. A lot fewer caribou that day. So I'm seeing fewer caribou every single day. And I didn't want to shoot just any caribou. I want to shoot like a nice bull, mature bull. And so that second day, I'm like, okay, you haven't seen it. It's been like, I didn't see a caribou until 1 o'clock. And it was something like 1:30. So I'm like, okay, this is getting a little like, have we missed? Was there like a little cell of caribou and they moved through and now it's over? Like, should you be picky? Like, are you going to regret your decisions? Because I had passed. I had an opportunity on a smaller bull that I didn't take first day as well. So then I had a really nice bull come across the river by himself, and I had him in like 24 yards, and the wind shifted, and he blew out of there. Only caribou I saw within range all day. Next day, I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, like, like I don't know how much longer this is gonna last. Like, you might not have any more opportunities. Same situation, like didn't see any caribou all day, and then midday-ish saw a pretty good sized band of caribou coming across the river, and headed them off, and was able to stick an arrow into one of the bulls. Not the bull I wanted to. I actually drew back on a really big, nice caribou bull. But then another caribou like stopped right behind him as I was at full draw. So I had to like quickly just like turn to my right where there was another bull and just kind of guess the yardage. And I just happened to make an educated guess and guess right.
Those are tough to gauge, the caribou. I mean, for the most part, it was kind of tough for my wife and I to judge mule deer, because if you haven't been around them a whole bunch, it's you kind of looking at points and spread and height and those sort of things. But blacktail deer, you just kind of look at points and okay, that's a nice looking buck. But with caribou, there's just so stinking much going on above the head. It just there's things everywhere.
Right.
It's hard to tell unless there's something that's right next to it. If there was a lone bull, it'd be pretty tough for me to figure out, all right, is this a really awesome bull? Is this like an all-time bull? I have no clue, which I think is kind of nice because I won't have to worry about, not quite big enough, because, it'd be my first like big bull when I was up there for the cull the herd. hunt in March, it was -30, so we weren't really being picky, and all the bulls had shed their antlers anyway, so it was just like, all right, take that cow. And it was a nice one. They had smaller antlers, but it wasn't part of the program there. Was there something specifically were you looking at, like a double shovel, or just mass, or just it's all good?
And I just kind of know it when I see it, Jeff. Yeah. And I don't, it's funny thing about antler size is like, it's such a personal thing. I've killed a lot of, I am not ashamed to say, like, mule deer. Like, I have killed a lot of forky bucks in my life. When I was young, the rule we had was like, you shoot the first thing that's legal. And we did, and for a long time. And it's not that I don't, for me, it's just about like trying to challenge myself to do, push what I can do. And so for a caribou, for me, it was just like something that had like, for sure, double shovels, but just like a cool, interesting rack. That's all it is. Like something that interests me, because it's a personal thing for me. It's like I don't necessarily care if it's something that other people find interesting, but if it's something that where I'm like, that is a very like great bull that's representative of a mature age class, or it's got something interesting going on, like I'd be like, okay, that would make me happy when I looked at it on a wall.
Yeah.
And bring back good memories. Like, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, we don't get a whole lot of blacktail down here that have like junk and stickers and extra stuff and drop tines, things like that. My buddy shot one, I think 2 weeks ago with his bow, and he said, man, that I shot it because it had an eye guard that kind of drooped over and hooked down. I thought, that's pretty sweet, but that's the same thing. Just, man, that's a cool looking thing. There's no question I'm going to take it. No other point matters. That's a cool, sinking eye guard or whatever. It was just cool. And that's fun to look at. And I mean, it's something really cool about a nice, beautiful, symmetrical, uniform 4x4 blacktail buck. But, some of that weird stuff it's not as common. Look at some of the whitetails back east, and like normal doesn't exist, it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, I know, man. My second blacktail buck I shot last year had a almost 4-inch kicker on his antler. So I got kind of spoiled real quick. But yeah, I don't know what it is about the character. I'd probably wrap that all up in the character term, but I love character on animals. And I just like the simplest way I can describe it is like, it's like for me anyway, now, when I look at maybe like a buck, like I just got one of my blacktail back from last year. And I was just looking at it and I was just reminiscing. It just brought so many like happy memories back into my head. I was like, man, just looking at it just like brought happiness to me. And that's like the simplest way I can describe it. And that's all for me. Like, that's all I look for is like, does it bring me the Marie Kondo thing? Like, does it bring me joy? Yes, it does, or it doesn't. And that's the simple, and I know it when I see it.
Yeah. It is a weird thing to look at the wall and think that's the head of an animal or the skull cap of an animal on some level, but beyond that, it's easy to get past that and just think, man, that is such a great experience. I'm looking at my wall now and I remember who I was with and where it was and all those things, and just, oh man, so great, so rich and so interesting and so unique, and it's unlike any other deer you'll ever take. And that's so awesome to have those lasting memories, and you don't have to scroll through your phone to get that memory. Just having it on the wall, you can look right there, and there it is, always like fresh in your memory. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Yep. And it is true. It does seem kind of weird, but at the same time, it's like the most primal thing ever. And I can't explain it very well, perhaps. I feel like I'm at a loss for words as to like the why right now, but I know it does.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters. So like my caribou this year, like it was just like, I shot a barren ground caribou a couple years ago, and I never did anything with the antlers. Like, I don't have them mounted or anything. And I'm not somebody who always like, man, I used to saw my antlers up and give them away to my friends for their dogs for years. Like I never kept my antlers. When I was 17, I shot like a low 300 class bull. No, 16. Low 300 class bull and bull elk. And I just like didn't care. I mean, I just didn't care about the antlers. I don't know why, but I just didn't. Like I left that thing in my parents' backyard, let the squirrels chew on it, and I just didn't care. It didn't bother me one bit. And it's like, I think that thing is probably like is gone by now. Yeah, I just didn't have an interest in antlers. I'd say like now I kind of have an interest in antlers. Like I certainly have an interest in hunting mature animals, but I definitely like will keep animals that are special to me. So anyways, it's an interesting thing. It's kind of been an evolution in my hunting a little bit.
When I was getting my second bear sealed or something like that, I went to this guy's place, and like there's some people who can seal things for you like at their place because they're certified, so you're not going into Fish and Game. So we're in this guy's like basement, and he had these skull caps it started off as a forky, like a pretty nice forky, and it was amazing. Between that forky, there were like 30 deer slowly tapering in size up in the rafter down to like it was maybe an inch long spike on each side, but it was crazy. Like he had shot so many bucks, and it was almost like he was planning. I need one a little bit smaller than last year. It was pretty crazy. It was impressive and odd. I'd never seen like that thing of trophies, but it was the whole time you sealing the bear. I was just like, man, that's crazy. That's a lot of deer because there had to have been 30, but
Yeah.
just tapering from forky down to chopstick down to half a chopstick, just nuts. But
Yeah.
why not?
Yep.
So
Why not? Yeah, that's some OCD stuff right there.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, to each his own. His own. Anyway, so yeah, just to like bring it back to caribou, it's like, yeah, I just like just a mature caribou bull, like double shovels, like palmated tops. The bull that I almost shot the first day, he had this cool tine coming off his tops it must have been, I mean, I'm not making this up, it must have been like 18 inches long coming off, like both sides of the back, the top, back. I've never seen a caribou like that before. So imagine like the palms, the top, and you've got kind of like points coming off the palms. And he had just one on each side that was just like an 18-inch point. It was the coolest caribou I've seen in a while. And I was just like, man, I'd love to kill that caribou because it's unique.
Yeah.
So,
so moving on to the moose here, I think it was you were talking with Chad from the Backcountry Rookies podcast, and you said that I don't want to get it wrong here, but of the 3 hunts, the moose wasn't as fun. You didn't like it as much, and is that true? And what was it about that hunt that wasn't as appealing as the other 2?
well, that is true. And it wasn't necessarily that I didn't like hunting moose. It was probably a combination of a few things. Number one, I felt like our air transporter put us in a pretty marginal spot. And so we kind of had to deal with that. And I'm not trying to like badmouth this particular air transporter, but it's a reality that like I just can't like get around. I was it was just me hunting. And so I think in his mind, he was taking out a lot of groups of like 2 to 4 hunters, and he was putting the groups of 2 to 4 in spots where there were more bulls because it was more likelihood that they would get 2 bulls, 2 or 3 or 4 bulls in their group. And I think he saw me, and he's like, well, we just need 1 bull for this guy. So I'm going to put him in a spot with like fewer bulls. And in fact, he told me on the way out, he's like, this is really like a 1 bull spot. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, well, after you kill a bull, it's kind of over. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound good. But,
I would like to kill one.
Okay. Yeah. And it was just, anyways, it's just hard. I'm not trying to like make excuses because I don't believe in that, but like it was just like it was a giant swamp that was like completely open. So it was like this short grass with like a string of trees going down the middle, and about a mile to mile and a half on either side of the string of trees was open. So there wasn't a lot of cover. There were moose there. We saw moose. I saw two moose the entire time we were there, but there's not a lot of moose. And I called in a bull moose the first morning that we were there, but he was not legal. It was kind of on the edge of being legal. It was for non-residents, it was a 50-inch 3 brow tine restriction. And he definitely wasn't 50 inches, but I couldn't quite tell if he had 3 brow tines. So I just didn't shoot him. And I had him at 44 yards broadside. So I certainly at least could have let an arrow loose on him. And after that first day, I thought, well, hell, we just called it a bull. Like this is going to be great. Well, that turned out to be the only bull we saw. And it was just the way the winds were, it was very hard for me to see how any moose living in that vicinity wouldn't smell us or know we were there, living there after being there for a while, just because of the way the winds were blowing from our camp down this timber stringer towards this river off in the distance, which I would assume is where the moose would be coming from. And again, I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself an expert on moose hunting, but I've hunted a lot of places and a lot of animals in a lot of different places. And I'm I imagine these moose are kind of cruising around through the cover, coming out in the open to feed a little bit, and then going back to the cover to bed, which means they're largely in this timber stringer that we're living in, cruising up and down it. And it just did not seem likely. It seemed very unlikely, let me put it that way, that we were going to be fortunate enough to get moose to come through there that weren't going to smell us since we were living there. So that was just kind of a bummer. And we gave it a go. And I even actually brought a tree saddle, got up in my saddle. I limbed a tree and got up there a ways to try and hung out there a number of morning and evenings to get a vantage. And I could see really well from up there and never saw a moose from up there. So yeah, it just didn't go as I had hoped. And I think the other thing that I struggled with in that particular spot, is it was a true swamp moose hunt. And it just seemed we had almost all the middle of the day where there was no activity. You couldn't really walk anywhere because the water was either too deep. If you went one direction, you just couldn't walk a lot of directions. And if you did walk anywhere, it was so damn noisy. It was what's the point? You sounded like an elephant going through the trees. Right. And in some ways that's not bad. You could sound moose are loud when they're walking around too. So it could just, they could assume the sound of moose. But it was just challenging, for a variety of reasons. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, but I'm not, just to be clear about it. I'm not upset about it or anything. It was just it's an experience. I don't believe in regrets or anything. I genuinely don't. So that was something. Every experience gives you an opportunity to learn something. I learned a lot, and I will take that with me kind of on my next hunt, and it's an educational experience. And I got to also experience a place I'd never been before, and that was interesting in its own right.
Mm-hmm. People talk a lot about learning stuff on hunts. And then you just mentioned it. What did you learn on this? Is there a general thing, as you were flying home from the overall experience, or was there kind of one thing per hunt, or what did you learn from these hunts?
Oh man, lots of stuff. I'd say for the moose hunt, I think I certainly learned a little bit more about the kinds of questions I would ask an air transporter for moose hunting going forward. I've flown with a fair number of air transporters in Alaska. I should have asked more questions of this particular company before I went with them, about sort of where I was going to go. the kind of hunt it was. Like I know better, and I should have done that, and I didn't. So do your homework was certainly one of them. I'd say what else did I learn? There were definitely like gear things I learned that I had some notes on in terms of like what to bring, what not to bring. I was reminded on my caribou hunt, even though I was hunting in that 40-mile country. We encountered there's still some like tundra over there, which kind of surprised me. I was reminded how much I dislike walking on tundra, and not so much a learning experience so much as it was like a visceral reminder of what that's like. Patience, like I think on the caribou hunt I was questioning my judgment quite a bit about whether or not I should be so picky with the kind of caribou that I wanted to kill. And it was also like, you only brought your bow. This is my internal monologue. It's like, you only brought your bow, and you're not seeing a lot of caribou. This, if you really, why are you doing this to yourself? And I, in the end, it all worked out. And I think you just have to have confidence in yourself and your abilities, like to the bitter end. Don't change plans midstream just because you get a little nervous or things aren't going exactly as you had hoped right away. Like things went very well in Kodiak, like right to plan, right? Things did not go as planned to plan on my caribou hunt. And it's easy to be like, well, I'm going to switch it up and do something different. Or if I had a rifle, I might have been like, give me that rifle. Which is why I didn't even bring a rifle. It's, it's just takes the option out of the way. So you don't have that. You don't have it. And, I didn't need it, but had I had it, I probably would have grabbed it.
Yeah. People also talk about things they learned about themselves, especially when they go on some sort of epic thing. That's the whole into thin air. People wanted to go up Everest even after Krakauer wrote about how disastrous it was and how horrible it was. And, more people are going to apply for the elk hunt that Corey Jacobson went on because it was miserable. He's saying don't go, but people are still going to do it. So, I think a lot of that is just the human, we want to find out if we have what it takes. Was there anything that you learned about yourself on this particular trip?
Always. Yeah, for sure. So I would say on the moose hunt in particular, I had a lot of time to just sit, and just, there was no other option other than just like hanging out, and which I don't like doing. And I do not like doing it. There's just like, I'm not shitting you, man. We were sitting from some days. It was like, it was hot and it was like, okay, there's nothing moving. It's 10 o'clock and nothing's going to move again until, 6 o'clock at best. So what are we going to do? So I just sat there, and I think I had a lot of time to journal and write about things. And, as much, I will say, like this entire trip was a big time away from my business, my family, and those are things that I know that I need for just my mental health. It's just kind of part of who I am. At the same time, I certainly learned that I don't like being away from my family that long. It's this interesting juxtaposition of like, I need to do these things for myself, but I don't like being away from my family that long. So I don't know what the answer there is, but like I spent a lot of time kind of like thinking about that and how, just that duality and how kind of weird and odd and messed up it is. But I don't know what to, there's no right or wrong answer. Like I'm going to keep doing what I do, and I'm going to keep thinking about it. And maybe as I get older, I'll figure out kind of where my happy medium is.
Yeah. I think if there was a right answer to everything, there'd be like one book, one podcast episode,
Yeah.
one magazine article, but all the content is just hunters and anglers trying to explain that feeling, never truly getting it, but each attempt is something, and it's fun to look at the attempt that people make, whether it be, mule deer hunting and recording it, or blacktail hunting or moose hunting or whatever it is, or we're just trying to explain that and share that, and we all kind of know what it does for us, and it is different, but it's also the same, and it's pretty fun to be able to share that and hear other stories about other people that are thoughtfully going through it too.
Yeah. And I think, so one last thing, and I don't mean to get too like esoteric or philosophical, but like learning to be present in the moment is hard for a lot of people, including me. I think for hunting and hunters and anglers, like there's no trip like the one coming up, right? Like we don't look back on trips and be like, man, I'm excited about that trip that I just went on. It's like, you're excited about the trip you have coming up. And when you're in it, just being present and soaking it all up is sometimes hard. And then it's like, it's over. And then you're just moving on to the next one. It's like you're, like a junkie looking for the next fix, it's like, and just learning to be just like present in that day, in that morning you're hunting, and not, even if it's a crummy morning of hunting, enjoying it for what it is. And the fact that you're able to be there. And again, I don't mean to sound like sappy, but my friend, one of my really close friends got in a climbing accident and can't walk anymore just recently before I went on this trip. And it's like, we're just lucky sometimes to be able to like walk your own two legs and see a place, to walk up a mountain in Alaska or wherever it is. It's like, that's a gift. And just learning to like appreciate that in addition to everything else is, I was trying to do that every single day when I was in Alaska. And every day I hunted this year, honestly, even if it was miserable, even the days where I was like, this sucks. Like, I'm tired, I'm hungry, it's wet, whatever. It's like, well, you're alive, your legs work, and you can walk. Like, that's something.
Yeah, man. That's the perfect send-off.
Yeah.
So where can people find you? Do you have a film coming out about this hunt?
Yep, we're going to start. So we're going to do two things. We're going to have like episodic content for my whole Alaska hunt. We got actually some great footage, and as well as a few other hunts. And then we're also putting together a film about Kodiak that will be coming out this spring as well. I just don't know when quite yet. You can find us on Instagrams at Argali Official, and our website is argalioutdoors.com.
Awesome. Thanks, man. It was great to talk to you. Look forward to seeing what you're up to next year.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Always good to chat with you. Thanks for having me on.
Take care, man.
Okay,
bye.